Welcome to Astro Venture, the DSLR astrophotography channel. Hey there, Astro Ventures, welcome back. If you're new to this astrophotography channel, my name is George, and this is the astrophotography channel for DSLR or mirrorless camera bodies, combined with the lenses we already own and a simple star tracker like the Skyguider Pro or the Star Adventure. Now, today I'm going to do a video more so for a lot of our newcomers that might be out there looking for videos on how to shoot the upcoming lunar eclipse. And this is intended for the person that doesn't have a star tracker and you're just looking for that video. And with that, I'm going to be using a typical camera, a crop sensor as we would call it, that most people will own, along with what would be a kit lens, not some high-end professional glass, to photograph the lunar eclipse. And I'm going to walk you through. So here we go. First off, starting with a standard crop sensor camera that most people own, a kit lens, 55 to 300 millimeter is typical. You're going to want to shoot out at the 300 millimeter end so you can get as much reach as possible. When you set this up, you're going to want to have your image stabilization off. That can either be done from the side of the lens, or on some cameras, you need to shut it off from inside of the body through the menu setting. So shut that off. The reason being is because we're going to be mounting on a tripod, and the image stabilization will recognize movement of the moon and think that it's stabilizing you, and it will cause your image to get blurry. Okay, next, let's go on to the tripod. The tripod, you're going to want a heavy-duty solid tripod because you need it to be rock steady. Now, not everybody has a high-end rock steady one. What you can always do is hang a bag with a little bit of weight, provided you don't have wind that's going to be blowing it around, and that will help stabilize it by adding a little bit of weight to the tripod. Don't go overboard, you're just looking to steady it. Okay, next, after getting focus on the moon, you're going to want to shut off, and it may either be on the lens or in the camera's menu, you're going to want to shut off the autofocus. Reason being is when you go to take your picture, each time you hit your button, you're most likely going to trigger the autofocus. Of course, if you have a bit more experience, you may know how to have shut that off and do what we call back button focus. But again, this is intended for the newcomer that's looking for some information. So shut off that autofocus once you have focus. Okay, next, let's see here. Typically, on a consumer camera, not a high-end professional, your lenses are going to telescope out. And when you point this up towards the moon, it may retract or creep back into the lens body. Simple little fix for that. A rubber band, put it around the telescope part, push it up against the body of the lens, and then slightly retract until you bump into that rubber band. Other suggestions, people will sometimes suggest using tape. I don't like that because I don't want any residue left. The rubber band is nice and clean. It works well. So there you go. Let's see here. When you get ready to shoot, on the camera, you're going to want to have it on and in live view, so it's turned on the back display. Now, if you have mirrorless, you're already in what we would call live view. The reason you want to do this on a DSLR is because every time you take a picture, the mirror inside has to come up, and it causes what we call mirror slap. It's going to cause a vibration. Your image isn't going to be as sharp as it could be. So turn on the live view so you see it on the back of the camera. Next, if you're familiar, you'll want to shoot in RAW. RAW is going to give you much more latitude for editing your image. But let's say, hey, I'm new and I'm not looking to get into all that Photoshop-y stuff, okay? You can shoot in JPEG, you know, and go for it. It's more important that you capture this lunar eclipse when you can. Okay, so let's get started. I'm in live view, I'm already focused, I have my image stabilization off, I have my autofocus off, I've got the moon framed up where I want, and you'll be surprised at how quickly the moon moves, but I've got it all framed up where I want it, and I'm ready to take my first image. So what settings am I looking at? As I said, you're going to want to shoot in live mode, and the other thing is that you're going to want to set your camera to timed release, you know, where you press the button, you can run out in front of it, and then it takes the picture. You're going to want to do that because you touching the camera to trigger the shutter is going to vibrate the camera. So make sure that you have it in timed release, or you use an intervalometer that you can click and trigger the camera. You don't want to be touching it. So let's see here. You'll see on the screen, this image is shot at an ISO of 160. I used an aperture of f9, and my shutter speed was at 1/800th. Now, that may seem kind of fast to you, but the reason being is because the moon itself is a giant reflector, and in full moon, that's a lot of light blasting back. So oftentimes the mistake in doing a image of the moon is that you need more like daytime settings than you do nighttime settings. That's why your moon washes out. And to get the detail to come out in the moon, we tend to want to be slightly on the underexposed side, slightly to the dark. That way there, the detail shows up. So there's your first image of the moon. Okay, now let's take another one. On this image here that you're seeing, this was shot at an ISO of 160, f9, and again, an aperture of 1/800th of a second. And you'll notice that the red of the lunar eclipse, correction on that, shutter speed of 1/640th, you'll notice that the red of the lunar eclipse is not showing up on the moon. And the reason being is the range between how dark the actual eclipses versus the directly reflected light off of the sun is so great that you're not going to pick up that red. It's going to blacken out the moon eventually. So you're going to have to make some shutter adjustments or ISO adjustments, and we'll take a look at that now with this image. On this particular image, the ISO, I had to bump it up to 320. I apologize for the neighbor's dogs. We had to bump up the ISO to 320 because the lower ISO just couldn't capture enough light. We opened up the aperture of our lens to a 5.6. Most kit lenses at 300 millimeters, you can open up to that aperture. Then our exposure, we had to extend that all the way out to 1 second to 1.3 seconds so that we could take a quick enough photo to not get blur, but long enough to collect light. Now, those are the settings that I used with my Nikon D7100 and a kit lens. Each camera will be a little bit different, and maybe you do have some better glass so that you can open up your aperture a bit more. It's yours to play with, but you will have to make adjustments to get the red to show up in the lunar eclipse, or the blood of the blood moon in a lunar eclipse. Here's the key though, okay? You need to be looking at the images and, if you're familiar, the histogram, because your camera will try to tell you to lighten the image. And that's because it's seeing the dark of the night sky combined with the darkness of a lunar eclipse. And you're going to, if you follow the instructions of the camera, you're going to end up making it so bright you'll wash out that color. To get the blood color of the lunar eclipse, you really need to be more on the underexposed side. So I hope that helps. If you found this video helpful, please share it. And if you're kind of interested in this whole astrophotography thing, consider subscribing and ringing the bell and, you know, come along on this journey, because there's a whole lot of astrophotographers that are really into this stuff, and not everybody has this high-end equipment. It doesn't require as much as you think. And lastly, before I let you go, we do have a Facebook group called Astro Venture DSLR, and you'll find other astrophotographers, and it's a really friendly place if you're looking to get started. Until next time, I wish you clear skies and uneventful nights.